retirement today. Yesterday, we got that official news from a couple reporters. The offensive line is in serious need of help. Come to this episode and you'll hear it.
Let's go get him. Let's go get him today, man. Let's go. Hey, dumb it down. 3, 1, 2, 3. Dumb it down.
What is up, Rohan? How's it going, my man?
Oh, going good. It was a crazy night last night. I graduated high school, and we had all that shenanigans and all that. I got home at 6:30 this morning. It was an amazing night, but yeah, I'm excited, man, because we just got some huge 49er news, and nothing excites me more than talking about my favorite team.
Hey, congratulations once again on graduating. I hope you had a hell of a night. Hope you didn't wake up not feeling too well because those are the worst. I remember those. So hopefully you didn't wake up with a nice little hangover or whatever. Um,
Ah,
so we got that Alex Mack news, right? But like yesterday, so it was reported that they restructured his deal, and like right away, everyone knew, okay, restructure of a deal means that Alex Mack is officially retiring. But you and I have been saying for a little while that we both thought that Alex Mack would retire. Um, why did you think he was retiring when we did think like when we talked about it previously? Because there was times you would say like, yeah, we think he's gone. So why did you think that?
yeah, so I mean, I was wavering. When it came draft time, I thought it was somewhat of an indication that he was gone. And the reasons were the 49ers, look at the way they drafted and signed offensive linemen. They drafted Nick Sakel and they drafted Spencer Burford. Those guys were seen as guys with flexibility on the offensive line. They had the potential to play on the tackle, but also best suited in as a guard. And then Sakel, who played left tackle in college, also had the flexibility to play center. At least his head coaches thought so. He played it a bit at the Senior Bowl. So I thought the flexibility meant two things. One of those guys, specifically Zakel, could actually compete at center at some point, or the flexibility allows our normal swing guy in Daniel Brunskill, who's played a variety of positions, to hone in on one specific position, which was the center position. Then we signed Donovan West, we signed Jason Poe, two more centers, and I thought there was an insurmountable amount of depth, which could lead to the Alex Mack retirement. I thought that was the thought process behind them drafting. Then again, though, they didn't necessarily draft one early when guys like Cam Jurgens were available or mid to late in the second round, and then there were other options available as well. So there were like some indications, and then there were other indications that he wasn't. You saw certain just certain tidbits where you thought, oh, he might be coming back recently. Then Kyle Shanahan dropped a bomb where he said, "I think we all know what's happening," and then Alex Mack officially announced his retirement.
So yeah, I would be in the same situation as you. So like the reason why I thought he was retiring wasn't because of like the moves they were making. Like because a lot of people are like, oh, they're not drafting a center, that means he's coming back. But like I was always in that situation where no news is bad news in terms of Alex Mack. So like same thing with Joe Staley, right? Because the 49ers obviously like there was question marks around Joe Staley whether he would return or not. The no news was more so okay, that means he's coming back because Joe wanted to get a ring, right? He was always this long guy, long term 49er. So like for Joe Staley's no news was actually good news for the 49ers in a way because I thought he was coming back. Now with the Alex Mack situation, I thought much different. The guy signed a contract last year with the 49ers that was very flexible for him to retire after that last year. It was a the way it was structured, everything that it was going, it pointed to him having a 1 year opportunity to win a Super Bowl with the 49ers and then retire. And then when they drafted you said his name Zakel.
Yeah, Zakel.
So when they drafted Nick Zakel, like that was after learning how the 49ers front office and their scouting department viewed him, they actually viewed him as an interior offensive line and they loved him at center. So that to me kind of pointed that I think it's going to be Nick Zakel there competing with Daniel Brunskill unless the 49ers make a signing, which there's a couple guys we can talk about, right?
Yeah.
Um, the thing is with Nick Zakel, he's never played there. He has the IQ to play there, but now you're
Yeah.
asking a young rookie to do a lot on the offensive line, and that's where it gets very confusing. Do you trust a rookie playing center, or would you rather have Daniel Brunskill, who for 3 years in a row, if he goes to center, would be at a different position? What would you rather have? Nick Zakel going from right now from OTAs all the way into camp and learning that position like it's his, or handing it over to Daniel Brunskill?
Now, I think the 49ers over the last 2 years have developed somewhat of a system with their rookie draft picks, right? Because they're in a position of contention, they don't necessarily have a ton of holds, so they don't look to immediately they don't look to draft in the immediate range. They also look to draft for the future. We saw that with Aaron Banks last year, who didn't suit up, but he was the immediate left guard supporter or like support for Laken Tomlinson, who the 49ers probably expected to leave with a hefty contract in free agency, like that happened this year. So to me, I don't know if Zakel is ready at the moment. Like you said, he's an unknown. He hasn't played center over a strong capacity, and his coaches were talking about how he wanted to play all five positions in college. And how he wanted experience because that's what's necessary in the NFL, especially at least that's what's valuable in the NFL. However, coming out of a small school like Fordham, he was just the left tackle. He's the biggest guy on the field. He has to play left tackle. So you're right. It's an unknown. And if you can grasp it quickly, this Shanahan offense, which has taken some players a year or so to grasp, if you can grasp it quickly and deal with the responsibility, then by all means give him the position. But I think it is a tough task to ask, especially when the competitor is a guy who's been in the system for a minute now and also has experience playing center. And that's Daniel Brunson.
So I'm in the same situation, right? Like I don't want to hand it over to a rookie, cause especially with the lack of experience there. But at the same time, it's like Daniel Brunskill. It's kind of hard to be a player in the NFL or I get any sport in general, and you're constantly switching positions because you have new assignments, new things that you have to learn how to do and master to a T. We saw Daniel Brunskill tackle. He looked very solid as a swing tackle, a guy who could play any position. He goes to guard, he struggles a bit, picks it up a little bit better, and starts getting the hang of stuff. So stuff like that, where it's like, damn, do we move Daniel Brunskill again, which I'm not a fan of. So I would rather have Zach Lakel or Zakel play there, in my opinion. But it's just kind of hard to trust a young center with a young quarterback and Trey Lance. But then again, there's also a player that I've actually have wondered if he could play center. He's actually competing at right guard. Jalen Moore, um,
Mm.
in my opinion, would be a phenomenal center. I personally thought him coming out was a traditional, a true guard. A lot of people thought he was a true tackle, but from what I've seen, he has the ability to play center and guard. So I have this conversation with a few guys on Twitter, and they were saying no way he plays guard. He's a true tackle. That's where he could play, and then he starts playing right guard. So I would be very interesting to see if Jalen Moore, if he's in a situation where the 49ers don't see him winning this battle, if they start putting him at center, because now, hey, if you don't have a good backup center for whatever center you're throwing out there, if that guy goes down, you are screwed on the offensive line because we saw what happened when the 49ers had issues at center, right? They end up having to have Ben Garland end up playing center one year. Ben Garland's not the best, but he
Back
was
in 20.
capable of doing. Yeah, so but he was capable of doing so. Luckily, the 49ers had the opportunity to have Mack go down last year. If he was down, they would have also been in that similar situation. Who do they put at center? Because there's also Jake Brendel, or his name is Jake Brendel, right? Or is it Jack?
Yeah. Jake Rendell.
Jake Brendel. So Jake Brendel, who could also play that center position. So it's going to be a very confusing situation for the interior offensive line. Now, there's a couple guys out there in the free agency. Would you be willing to bring any of them in? Because I know everyone's talking about Tretter, that the 49ers should bring him in. He does have injury concerns, whether people agree with it or don't, because he's able to play a lot. What would you do free agency wise? Because out there that you could bring in.
Right. So obviously, like you just mentioned, the top name in free agency right now is JC Tretter. Obviously, the link is he's a veteran center. He played in Cleveland, I think, with Kyle Shanahan. And so he's a very good player. Matt Paredes is still there as well. I think those are the two only starting caliber players in free agency at the moment. Now, Tretter has its positives and negatives. One of the most well, I can't say durable necessarily, but one of he'll show up on game days. He played 82 out of 82 potential games with the Cleveland Browns over the last 5 years. He will play on game days. However, yesterday, the Athletics' David Lombardi, he reported that actually one issue with JC Tretter is that because his knees have been an issue for a couple of years, he's actually not been practicing as much and just instead shows up on game days. Now, you love that from a veteran. You love that he still has the energy to bring it on game days and still gives his 100%. However, with a young signal caller, I think that center quarterback relationship is important. And so if you don't get enough experience, enough game time between the two, I think that that could also lead to some early season struggles. So that is the one thing that I'll say about JC Tretter. With that said, however, he is a significant upgrade to the offensive line at the moment just because the other guys that we have are unknowns. Jake Brendel has never been placed in the starting role. This is the first time where he's actually played with the first team in OTAs or like really in any offseason capacity. And like you said, Jalen Moore, he also hasn't played center in the NFL. And like you, actually, last season, I thought he projected well as a guard. I thought he was going to be drafted for a 2022 position as a guard, just especially because guys like Justin Skule and even Brunskill could play that swing tackle role. And I thought that because there were guys that fit that mold, you slide Jalen Moore into guard where he can use his athleticism to a better extent. And also the pass protection, it might not be as bad coming from the interior. So that was one thing, but the unknowns are there. So I can see the benefit of JC Tretter. It really comes down to the money. How much will it cost? And how much do the 49ers think that they can get out of the Tretter Lance relationship, knowing that they're probably going to have to move on from him in a year or 2 years or 3 years when he, probably two, when he announces his own retirement.
So that's a very interesting thing, right? Because like even though he's not practicing, you get him on the field during game days. But I think the biggest thing is getting that continuity with Trey Lance in camp is going to be very vital to a center quarterback tandem because they work hand in hand. And the way Kyle Shanahan's offense runs is if that center and that quarterback are not on the same page, a lot of things
Mhm.
collapse. So that the center position for Kyle Shanahan's offense is one of the key positions. Um, I think one of the most important positions in his offense, and that's why Kyle Shanahan has actually spent decent money or brought in someone he really trusts. He spent money on Richburg that year. Unfortunately, that very severe injury takes him out of the picture, and then Alex Mack 1 year deal. Um, there's actually a guy. I mean, it's not the best center or not the best thing, but I think they could get him on a cheap trade because JC Tretter. I would love to bring him in, but I'm not going to rely on a player who has a knee tendonitis and knee issues like that because the likelihood of him getting injured is very high. He's with the Miami Dolphins. Is Michael Dieter. He's not the best center, but they're playing the guard they just signed from Connor Williams. They just signed from the Dallas Cowboys. He's actually expected to start at center. So now, what do they do with their center? Right? Do they keep him as a backup, move him to guard? I think the 49ers should make a call. You have that relationship with Mike McDaniel already there. There's also a few other centers you can make phone calls on that their contracts are going to be expiring next year. So that's something they could be doing. Make some phone calls. Um, in my opinion, what I would do if I'm the 49ers is I'm making a trade for a center. I'm someone who I could at least trust to start if he wins that job, but I'm allowing these young guys to go compete and win that starting center position. Guys like Zakel. If Jalen Moore is not winning that battle, Jalen Moore, Daniel Brunskill, it has to be locked down because at the end of the day, when you have a young quarterback like Trey Lance, they have to be on that center quarterback has to be on the same page. And what worries me the most is that interior offensive line, which we need to talk about, right? So we're expecting Aaron Banks to start at left guard. We're penciling him in at left guard. Most people are. How do you feel about the interior offensive line with Taco, who is coming off of a severe injury?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the bigger holes I'd say on the 49er roster. And I mean, it's not necessarily saying as much given how complete their roster is top to bottom. But when you look at the interior offensive line, you're finally starting to trust rookies. And in a way, or not rookies, but young players. In a way that's a blessing and a curse, right? The 49ers are now going like they're embracing their next phase because they want to compete now while also having sustainability That's why they drafted Trey Lance. They want to compete over the next couple of years and take over the NFL over the next couple of years. So in that range, you need to let these young players develop, and also you need to let them have a role, because if you don't have these young players, that sustainability is not going to happen. And really, while we talk about unknowns, the only way to figure out an unknown is giving them experience and playing time. George Kittle said it about Trey Lance earlier this offseason. Hell, the only way he's going to improve is letting the kid play. So just like him, for all the other rookies and all the other young guys, you got to let them play. And the 49ers, it's somewhat of an interesting offseason because given the amount of injuries they've had at certain positions, right? At linebacker, Azeez Shire is out. At offensive line, since we're talking about that specifically, Daniel Brunskill is out right now. Mike McGlinchey is out right now. So, and Trent Williams is in that camp right now. So really, there are three positions where you're allowing young players and different guys to get themselves involved with the offense to see what they can do. Colton McKivitz is the current left starter at left tackle. He could slide back into guard if the 49ers feel very comfortable with that, or he could be the new swing tackle alongside Justin Skule, who's the current right tackle starter. So really, the 49ers are just implementing new guys, and that's why I love to see Jalen Moore starting right now at right guard, because this is the best way you can see if he can be starting caliber guard. If he shows enough flashes, and you can give him that position because he can be that future for you going on. So that's something that you want to see. One sec. But moreover, I think that really, when we look at the offensive line, I think it's in a way, a rebuilding offensive line on the interior. A ton of new young guys. We just got to see who develops and who really wins out in the immediate range as well as the long term range.
No, I absolutely agree. You have a bunch of young guys who need to compete and need to win jobs, right? You can't. So what you have to do with the 49ers offensive line is at some point you can't baby these guys, right? It's hard to say baby because these are grown men, right? But essentially what you're doing is you're trying to get them like the baby steps to take that starting role. But you're at the point where there's no way you can do it. Like you have to literally just throw them in there and learn on the fly. A guy like Aaron Banks he has big shoes to fill in Laken Tomlinson, and if he doesn't do too well, there's could be very, I guess, backlash on the why the 49ers drafted a guy who didn't start his rookie year and can't do so well in his second year in the NFL. You guys got like Jalen Moore, who should be competing for a job and winning a job. Yes, our O line is the worst unit currently, and it has a All Pro left tackle. There is that argument where people make, well, should you pay offensive linemen top dollar, or is it better to have a strong offensive line throughout the entire unit and not having anyone who's an All Pro? That's a very big question that a lot of people should be having, because if you look at some of the teams when they pay their best offensive linemen, they end up having to build through the draft the rest of the way. Am I too worried about the offensive line? I'll be honest, no, because I think it's going to be a run-heavy offense to start the season. And when it's a run-heavy offense, I think it's going to help the offensive line, especially young guys. When you're run blocking, your assignment is not as hard in the run blocking system that Kyle has, rather than in pass pro, because you get all these stunts, you get blitzes, so you have to be able to communicate with everyone. And for me, I'm not too worried about the offensive line. I'm really not, because I've seen what the 49ers offensive line could do with guys like Tom Compton starting, guys like we had Colton McKivitz start at left tackle. We actually had both of those guys start the same game on the tackle position, and they did. Our offensive line did totally fine. We actually bulldozed the team we played against, and we actually did fairly well in the pass game. So I'm not too worried, because Kyle puts his offensive line in great situations to compete and win. So the offensive line, I'm not too worried about. There's a big question mark on it.
Yeah, no, there is a big question mark, and that is a question mark that will be really tested this season, because you've got a young signal caller, and the 49ers are going to definitely face scrutiny if they let that young signal caller experience what other quarterbacks experienced this past year. We saw Justin Fields, we saw Zach Wilson, and Trevor Lawrence at times running for their lives because of their subpar offensive lines. Now, am I saying the 49ers offensive line is going to be a subpar offensive line? Not necessarily. Like we said, we have an all-pro on the offensive line and pretty solid starter in Mike McGlinchey on the other side when he is healthy. However, the unknowns right now are unknowns, so it's not necessarily the best formula. Will the 49ers go out and address the position, try and get more players? We'll see. You suggested a trade potentially with the Miami Dolphins for Michael Dieter. There are guys like Matt Pratis and also JC Tretter in free agency. So there's a numerous amount of options. I'm excited to see what the 49ers do and also excited to see who makes the most of this camp appearance. I saw a comment talking about Donovan West. I can't see an undrafted player like West starting immediately like some do. I think he's a project for year 2 and 3. I think this is a very, very interesting point because you're right. The 49ers have started him with the third team in both of their practices so far, behind Keaton Sutherland. Remember that, behind Keaton Sutherland, who probably is a practice squad player this year. Now, can the 49ers afford to lose Donovan West? Or sorry, can the 49ers afford to put Donovan or try to put Donovan West on the practice squad? That's a question because a team might try and claim a guy like West, who they believe could be a backup center in 2022 and a developmental guy that would be the starter in 2023. That might be a question. So I'm very interested to see what do the 49ers do with West? Do they elevate him to the second team at some point? Do they put him on the 53-man roster? Because I don't know if they're going to be able to keep him if they don't.
So to be honest, Rohan, I think he's like that comment just said, he's two to 3 years away. How's it going? And I actually tweeted that yesterday. Someone asked me about when retirement happened. They're like, "Oh, what do you think of Donovan West?" And I was like, "I think he's 2 to 3 years away." I mean, he went undrafted for a reason, right? There's don't get me wrong, he is a lot better than being an undrafted guy. He should have been drafted at some point in the draft. But when teams pass on him so much that it makes you wonder, okay, why did he go undrafted? What is he missing? Is it the size? Is it the ability to anchor? And to be honest, I'm not going to play a guy who went undrafted to be my starting center with a young quarterback like that because there's some issue there, right? That the whole league saw. So I think he's 2 years away, but the best situation for the 49ers to do is either you sign a guy like you're saying, Matt Pratis, JC Tretter, if they think he could be a guy who could at least, even if he doesn't make the roster, because if that knee issue is too big of a deal, you give him a vet minimum to be a guy who can mentor someone, right? I mean, even if he's not playing, he could be a backup guy who's mentoring someone and at least helping them out in that capacity. So at the time, you have a guy who could be a backup but also a coach. So that's something that you could bring in. But at the same time, is if you're going to bring one of those guys in, might as well make a trade for someone who could at least start and mentor these guys on a 1 year deal. Um, who do you think wins? And I know it's super early because we're just in OTA, so this question is going to be come up a lot throughout our episodes throughout the entire training camp sessions and everything. Who do you think wins the center position, and who do you think wins the right guard position? Because we know who's winning left guard.
Yeah, so if the 49ers stay put with their current roster, I have to believe that Daniel Brunskill, once he comes back from his knee tendonitis, will not defeat, but will beat out Jake Brendel for the starting job. The 49ers did speak highly of Brendel. John Lynch mentioned his name a ton during his post-draft press conference, and even that was an allusion to the point that Alex Mack could be retiring. But I think it'll be between those two guys at center at the moment, with Zakel also being in the mix as well. But the 49ers have started with Zakel at guard. They started Keaton Sutherland at center. They started Zakel and Burford at guard. I think they want to experiment that at least this year because they might see them as guards in the future. They alluded to that as well post draft. So I think it comes down between who did I say? Brendel and Brunskill with Zakel as a dark horse. I think Brunskill wins that job. And really, I don't know if it's more indicative of Brunskill or if the 49ers wanted what the 49ers want to do with Jalen Moore. I think because they play Brunskill at center, they're going to allow themselves to have Jalen Moore get a starting job. And I think that they were pretty high on him. They view him as a guard right now. Kyle Shanahan talked about it earlier this offseason. They're starting him at first team guard. And I think it'll be very important for him to get consistency and continue to get those first team reps. So I think the line will be Williams, Banks, Brunskill, Jalen Moore, and then Mike McGlinchey.
So you said the biggest thing you said, and is the knee tendonitis for Daniel Brunskill, which is a reason why. So I believe his contract, right? I have to double check. His contract is a 1 year contract, right? That he has.
Yeah.
And it's not full? I don't believe is it fully guaranteed?
It's the what do you call it? He got the right to So contract, so it's 1 year,
The exclusive rights free agent, right, or something like that.
yeah, yeah. So it was, I think it was 1 year, 2.433 million, if I'm not mistaken, and none of it is guaranteed, I believe.
So none of it's guaranteed. So like my biggest thing is with him is that knee tendonitis, right? That's a that's a serious conversation that a lot of people aren't having, right? They're just penciling in. We're penciling in Daniel Brunskill to start at right guard or center. Well, knee tendonitis is a legit issue for players, right? We see JC Tretter, a guy who doesn't practice and only plays on game days. How do we know Daniel Brunskill is going to be healthy? And we cannot rely on him now because of that knee tendonitis. This is why I think it's going to be a guy like Nick Zakel or possibly Jake Brendel, because yes, the better player is Daniel Brunskill, but if that knee can't hold up, he's not going to be starting on the offensive line, and especially for a guy going into a new position. Um, for me, it sucks to say, but I do not think Daniel Brunskill should be a guy we could 100% rely on because of that knee tendonitis.
Okay.
Everyone in the media and the reason why I'm saying this is because like we've seen what knee tendonitis does to players, right? In the history, there's Will Blackman went on record and he retired, played with the Packers, played with the Giants for a few years, and the Washington Redskins. He was a corner,
Mhm.
so it's a little bit. He explained it was with knee tendonitis. Literally every step you take, every time you run, you feel all the pressure, all the pain in your knee. He goes, luckily I was a corner, so he was talking about Todd Gurley at the time because Todd Gurley had the same knee tendonitis. He goes, I don't
Right.
understand how a player on the offensive line, defensive line, or a running back could do that because all that pressure, all the hits, all the weight you're landing on, it's just so much pain. So these players have to literally fight the pain plus whatever injuries they occur throughout the season. So for me, it's hard to rely on Daniel Brunskill. And I've been thinking about this for a couple of days because he hasn't been at OTAs practicing. He hasn't been doing all this stuff, and he's rehabbing this knee. Well, rehabbing this knee, it's one of those situations where look at Javon Kinlaw, right? He had the knee tendonitis issue or the knee scope. Well, I don't know what his injury was, but it was rumored to be knee tendonitis coming into the draft. He gets to complete surgery now. He's 100% better. So is Daniel Brunskill going to require a knee surgery in order to be 100% better? And that's the biggest question. So if West, Jake Brendel, Nick Zakel, and Daniel Brunskill do not pan out like this question's saying, we have a big, big, big serious need at center. But I think Jake Brendel, I think at the end of the day, it'll be between Jake Brendel, Nick Zakel, and Daniel Brunskill, whether his knee could hold up or not.
Yeah, yeah. It'll be like, I think the 49ers will give Brunskill obviously the opportunity to compete in training
Mm-hmm.
camp healthy. When it comes down to, can he man it better than a guy like Jake Brendel? Because it seems like they're high on Brendel, and also Brendel will have more experience with Trey Lance. Remember this. I think this is important. Lance is getting his first time with the first team. Also, what was Lance playing last year? He was playing on the second team. Guess who was the second team center last year? Jake Brendel. So majority of Lance's reps in OTAs when he was with the second team was with Jake Brendel. And then now, who's the first team center right now? It's Jake Brendel as well. So Lance is getting a rapport right now with Jake Brendel. Now, it depends on if Brunskill can develop that rapport while also maintaining himself to be the better player and fully healthy coming back from knee tendonitis in training camp. If that's the case, then yeah, Brunskill, I think, wins the job. And I believe he has the ability to do so. But you're right. There is an interesting connection there between the two.
So and it's not a knock on Daniel. I'm not trying to knock Daniel Brunskill, but if we're gonna if we're gonna talk about players, right, and like because people are saying, oh, don't bring JC Tretter in. He has knee injuries, knee concern. But then people are saying, oh, Daniel Brunskill should start at center. It's like, well, I would rather, for me personally, I would rather bring in JC Tretter and have JC Tretter take the odds on JC Tretter being healthy throughout the season than relying on Daniel Brunskill to be healthy during the season with the same injury. At least JC Tretter has dealt with it throughout his career. He knows how to handle it, how to keep it down, how to play on game days with it. Versus Daniel Brunskill, he's rehabbing that right now. So for me, it's one of those questions where I think all of Twitter needs to be talking about, all of 49ers media needs to be talking about, because not only is it a serious issue because the offensive line is the biggest question mark we have, but the main guy that people were calling on to take over that center position has a serious injury.
Yeah, definitely. And this leads us in a way to another topic because the 49ers, obviously, with Alex Mack's retirement and talking about all these rookies, they were able to sign their entire draft class yesterday. Talk to me about what that means for you and if it really holds any weight.
So with the signing of the entire draft, well, I don't think they signed the entire, did they? I think it was most of the draft class.
Right. It
I
was
haven't
an.
seen a few guys.
Actually, I do believe it was the entire draft class, all nine of their players.
Oh wow, really? I didn't see a few of them announced or anything. But that's how, dude, what that tells me is how broke the damn 49ers were cap wise because of Jimmy Garoppolo's contract. Other people, and I know I said the other day we weren't going to say his name, but it literally means they had no money to spend on their actual draft class because of that big contract they still have on their roster, right? The restructure, it means that Alex Mack is a great dude because if you really wanted to, you could retire, don't restructure your deal. Like some guys do that. But the way he did it, the way they 49ers went about business with him, the respect he has for Kyle Shanahan, and the respect the 49ers gave him is respectable, and that's what brings in veterans coming into later into their careers, right? Like that want to compete for a championship, and that's what I love about the 49ers organization at the point. Um, what it tells me is it's that time where we finally get to see these dudes actually compete on the field in OTAs because I'll be honest with you, if I was a young rookie, if I was a young cat and I haven't signed my contract yet, I'm not touching my toe. I'm not stepping a foot onto that field. You really think I'm going to go into that field with no guaranteed money and potentially me getting hurt in OTAs? No, I know I just got drafted, but I'm not doing that. My body is my business at that point. And so what it tells me is the 49ers finally get to have these dudes actually go in and compete and try to win jobs. So we have 49ers throwback. He says, "Same Marco." He's talking about Daniel Brunskill situation. I agree, but we care about Trey Lance and nothing with upgrading. We saw the Jets and Bengals, so did it. So they did it, and they learned a lesson. So I think he's talking about I think what he's trying to say is we saw what the Jets and Bengals offensive line looked like and how their quarterback struggled and got hurt. So he's saying we need to make sure whatever we do is to protect Trey Lance so we don't have him get injured as we saw from those two organizations.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I think the 49ers are more competent offensive line wise than both of them. I think both, like especially the Bengals, I thought they improved it significantly. But I do think that our offensive line, regardless of who starts at that center position with the talent that we currently have, still should be in the top half of the league. I'd be surprised if we drop to the bottom half of the league. But talking about the rookies, I feel like this move was anticipated for a while in a way, right? 49ers probably knew about Alex Mack's decision at some point over the last couple of months, probably pre-draft, which meant they probably let the rookies know at some point when their contracts would be signed. And it was just like clockwork. Immediately after the Mack news, clears up a little over 4 million in cap because his with the restructure, he essentially agreed to a pay cut. Moved his salary from 5 million this year to near 1.5 million, and then his next year's salary was also diminished a couple million as well. Saved about or a little over 4 million in cap. And remember, one thing I wanted to let everyone know: you don't have to have a majority of the cap. At least the 49ers didn't to sign their draft class. They really only needed around 2 million to sign their draft class because the top 51 rule. Only the top 51 players on a team count towards the cap for a certain year. Now, obviously, you can push past that limit, but the top 51 is all that matters. And there were only three players for the 49ers that met that requirement: Danny Gray, Tyree Davis Price, and then Drake Jackson, all of whom had a cap hit combined of around 2-3 million, somewhere around there. So obviously the Mac news gave them that. And I wanted to pass one thing by you and see what your thoughts are. One other potential move I'm anticipating in the next couple of days is the release of D Ford. What do you think about that?
So I think the release of DeForest is actually something that should happen very soon because it's post June 1st, unless they're actually trying to give him the opportunity to show that he still has some gas in the tank. But I don't know why you would do so. Like, you've already wasted all these years, all this money, and I know that the way they restructured it, it's like it kind of benefits them to actually try to let him play during training camp and see if he has anything. Because if he does have something, it's cool to have him on the roster. But what's the possibility of you actually be able to rely on him during? Can you hear those sirens?
They're gone now. You good?
All right. See, man, if you happen to live in Modesto, you always have sirens around. No, but like you get the opportunity to rely on him, and I wouldn't do that. I would rather have the young guys you have, Samson Ebukam, the Komodo Dragon, and Drake Jackson, even Jordan Willis over D Ford at this point in his career because of the health wise. Now, when he is fully healthy, he is a freak of nature. He has that get off is unreal. But I think what it should do, I don't know how much it frees up in cap wise. I don't think it frees up much, right?
It frees up about 1.12 million, so it isn't that much, but yeah, just a little bit.
Yeah. So you free up 1 million. I mean, you could see if you could try to bring in one of those free agent. So the Komodo. So I'm gonna explain why I called him the Komodo Dragon. So he actually goes by that on Twitter, I believe. Like that's what his actual name is on Twitter. So
Mhm.
it's not me making up a nickname. When he signed. So when I on Twitter I tweeted out the 49ers should bring him in when he had his first initial visit, and then he retweeted it, commented whatever, and then I messaged him on Instagram and messaged back whatever. We're having a conversation, and on Instagram in his bio he had Komodo Dragon, so that's why his Komoko Toure, but I remember it as Komodo Dragon. So that's why I said Komodo Dragon. Not like I'm making up a name for him or anything. Um,
Yeah.
so I think they should definitely save that money. Like, don't really use it or go sign a center like Matt Pratis or JC Tretter if that's what they want to do. But with 1 million, you can't really do much with 1 million in the NFL, especially unless you're signing bottom end guys in the roster. And I don't think they really need that. Um, what would you say, for example? All right, because I know they're going to free up some cap space, and there's some free agents out there that they're still very serviceable and they're still good free agents. Is there anyone out there? I know it's off topic from the rookies and everything, but is there any free agents that you would bring in that you would like? Yeah, that guy would definitely help the 49ers roster.
That's a very interesting question. And immediately when I'm talking about free agents, my mind, while it might not be the biggest need at the moment, my mind immediately shifts to the cornerback position. Because right now, I think the cornerback position still has a good amount of players that are available in free agency. I think guys like Steven Nelson, esteemed veterans, are still available. And while you might not necessarily need that type of player right now, right? Because the 49ers have done well to bolster the cornerback room, getting around 8 to 10 players that can compete ahead of free agency, as well as a couple of young guys. They might just want to go a different route. But I do think that there's still a good amount of corners, especially if you want a veteran presence in the room. Because right now, the main veteran presence is Jason Verrett. He's recovering from injury, although he is definitely a valuable asset. But you got guys like Joe Hayden, you got guys like Trey Waynes, I believe, even Chris Harris, who's been a pretty good contributor over the past couple of seasons. You got those type of players who are still available in free agency and likely take a cheaper deal. I mean, I'm not going to say it, but Jaquaski Stard is still available in free agency. You know that. And like one thing about D Ford, right? The 49ers currently have 17 defensive linemen on their roster. They love hoarding defensive linemen. The main reason I can care less about the cap, the main reason that I believe D Ford should be cut is because it frees up a roster spot for a guy who probably isn't going to play. Like I think the 49ers alluded to this move earlier in the offseason, and I think that this is important because it gets you another guy for a team predicated on competition. It just allows for some more competition with an extra player. So with that move, they should have 2 extra spots. And I don't know if they're going to go veteran. I think they probably will try and go the younger route, right? Try and find different players, maybe who spent 1 or 2 years in the NFL. One of the one of the earliest guys they signed this season to a reserve future contract was a guy like Keyshawn Johnson. Not many people know who Keyshawn Johnson is, but he's only 25 years old. He was with the Arizona Cardinals. And, you know, those guys that are raw who could potentially develop into maybe a special teams ace, maybe like something like that, or like just a backup role player that you can have on the practice squad. That's what I'm looking to with those positions.
So I'm gonna answer the question, and I'm gonna. So I'm not actually going to training camp, but I'm not credentialed or anything. I'm doing my best to try to get credentialed and stuff like that. I might go to the open training camps depending on how my work schedule is because I'm a first year official teacher, so I have my own classroom where I'm doing everything on my own, so I don't have as much help. So depending on like all that stuff, I might be able to try to make a few of them, but I'll have a lot of people there that I talk to very closely that will be there. Rohan, are you going? 'Cause I know you've been trying to get everything situated too, right?
Yeah, so we're in talks. I'm not sure at the moment if I'm going to end up being at training camp, but if I am, then obviously that'll be a blessing. But at the moment, I'm unsure if I'm going to be there at training camp.
And you might even be in Wisconsin by the time training camp happens.
I think I go right after training camp because I'm going to end up being there in September or like early September. So that's near the season starts, which is actually really cool because the first week we play in Chicago. So I might be at
Oh,
that
that's
game.
pretty cool.
If we get that credentialed, I might be at that game.
So we'll come back to this question later, but I wanted to pin it. Just actually, I'll start it. I'll come back to it. So talking about free agents and stuff that we could bring in, I do like picking up a corner, someone who could fill like that slot role or like that veteran role because you do have Jason Red on the roster and everything, but you could have another veteran presence in that room doesn't hurt, especially during camp. A guy that I'm actually hoping the 49ers bring in, which I don't think they will, he's another tight end. So I know the 49ers have a couple tight ends on the roster. They have George Kittle, Charlie Warner. They have Ross Dwelly. They signed a tight end, didn't they?
Uh, I think they cut one and then they signed. You're right. They signed. He was a veteran. I'm forgetting his name off the top of my head, but he was a veteran
Okay.
or 2 year player that they signed once they cut Garrett Walston out of UNC.
Yeah, because I know they signed a tight end. I have to see what his name is because it's gonna bug me when I have stuff like this, and I usually like remember the name on top of my head. They have Ross Dwelly, Troy
Uh,
Fumagalli.
Troy Fumagalli is the guy who they recently signed. I think he played with Denver last year.
So yeah, so like, and then the Charlie Warner. So like the main guys on the roster actually like are um George Kittle, which is stud, Ross Dwelly, who didn't really do much last year. You have
Mhm.
Charlie Warner, who is the blocking tight end. So the way I see it is Charlie Warner and George Kittle are the only two tight ends on the roster. You do need another tight end. There's a guy still out there that he's athletic. Now, when he does well and he's having great seasons, it's because he is being used the right way. He's played for the Detroit Lions. He's played for
Uh,
the Pittsburgh
I know
Steelers. He
yeah,
uh,
yeah.
take a guess.
Eric Ebron, you know it. He and
Yep,
the
Eric.
thing. And before you give your spiel, I'm fine because Ebron is just 29 years old. I believe he's just 29 years old right now.
Yeah, he's 29 years old. He's an athletic tight end who could give you that second punch as a tight end in the receiving game. He's super athletic. Now he's played for the Colts, the Lions, and the Steelers. His best years came when he was with the Colts. He had a Pro Bowl year with the Colts. He had like 13 touchdowns. So he's a touchdown magnet in the red zone. He's a very athletic guy. And
Right.
the way I see it is when you have a guy like Trey Lance, he's going to most likely rely a lot on his tight ends, his main receivers like Debo and Ayuk, Jawan Jennings, the guys that he has this chemistry with. So he's going to rely on these guys. Now, a lot of times what happens is Kyle Shanahan likes to leave George Kittle in to block because he's that extra tackle, and he's a great blocking tight end. So when you have those two on the field, you don't know which one's going out for a pass. Like, and Eric Ebron is a great second option in the receiving game at the tight end position. He's still available. That'd be a guy I would love to bring in. I know a lot of people will be like, "Nah, he's not that good." He's actually pretty good when he's not the main tight end on the roster. And when he was with like a guy named Jack Doyle and guys like that in Indianapolis, he was a Pro Bowler because of his 13 touchdown season. And he had like 750 yards on that season. So that's a guy who I
Mhm.
would be willing to bring in.
Yeah. I'm going to throw out some interesting names just because I want to. And there are two positions on offense, two skill positions, that is, running back and receiver. Now, let me start with
Oh,
running back. There are a couple of interesting guys I mean, running back, always, there will be talented players still available in free agency. There are three names that pop out to me because they were or former 49ers. You got Carlos Hyde there, you've got Jerick McKinnon there, and then you also have Wayne Gallman there. Now, I think the third option is the most realistic, But what do you, maybe if not those names, what do you think of potentially adding another running back, especially at this point in camp when health might be somewhat of an issue. You don't want players getting injured at this point.
So you know who? So you said a lot of names that I like, but the name you did not say that I really like is Austin Walter. So the
Okay.
reason why I like is that special teams ability, right? He's been with the 49ers last year, last year, and I think the Jets claimed him when he got cut. Um,
Yeah.
he looked solid when he had the opportunity to run the ball. But that special teams ability is something that incites me. Because you're gonna have most likely on the roster, you're gonna have Elijah Mitchell, Trey Sermon, um, Ty Davis. Those are three main guys that you're for sure will be on the roster. And then outside of that, normally Kyle Shanahan will carry a fourth running back and with plus Kyle Juszczyk. So you only have five backs on the team or one on the practice squad. Austin Walter provides that special team ability, even though Trey Sermon plays special teams. Elijah Mitchell could play special teams, but you're not going to have your number one running back playing special teams. So for me, is you have to have a guy that could do that special teams role. And Austin Walter could return kicks. He could be that gunner on special teams. So that's someone I'm actually interested in. The guys you named are good running backs. They have like that history of being solid backs. But we're not looking for that solid
Right.
back, right? We're looking for the guy that to complement the room. If the best complement to the room is a special team guy who could carry the ball needed, but we're not looking for a guy to the ball. Ty Davis better be able to come in and carry the ball. Trey Sermon better come in, be able to his second year being drafted in the third round last year, should be able to carry the ball. And we know what Elijah Mitchell could do. So I'm not too worried in that running back room. But I do like some of the guys you threw Carlos Hyde out there. Who else did you throw out there?
I threw Wayne Gallman out there, and then maybe even Jet, good old Jarrett McKinnon.
Yeah, so you threw some good names that used to be with the 49ers out there. I don't think Jet would ever come back to the 49ers, especially with how he went on social media. I believe last year when he was signing with the Kansas City Chiefs and how he went about business, he kind of sounded like he was very mad at the 49ers organization. So I don't think
Mhm.
he'll ever want to come back to the 49ers. But I do like Wayne Gallman. I thought he should have made the roster last year. He would have been a very good guy when a lot of these running backs went down. So that would have been a good guy to have on the roster. Um, but but like I said, I'm looking more or so looking for a special team ability if we're gonna bring in like a running back or a corner at this point. Like they have to have something valuable on special teams.
Yeah, definitely. And I think Walter could be a very intriguing option if they don't view some of their other backs that they have right now as special teams worthy, because you're right, that matters to the 49ers for sure. And especially with the way that they've tried to improve the unit, that could be a way to not only ease like the load in the early part of the offseason for other players, but also provide you with a guy, just a flyer who could potentially make the team, or not even the team, but make the practice squad just based on special teams.
So
Now,
going back,
go
oh my bad, go ahead, Roger, go ahead.
Now, I was just going to throw out some interesting receiver names because I know we've talked about a few of these before. I don't necessarily know if they're realistic just because of the way the 49ers are going right now, because they want to go youth, but there are some very interesting receivers out there right now. Obviously, the main one, the glaring option that a lot of 49er fans have clamored for is Julio Jones. He is still a free agent. We also have Emmanuel Sanders, the guy who Debo Samuel credited as an amazing locker room guy back in 2019 when he was a developing receiver. He's out there. And then you still have other players. I mean, Odell Beckham is out there. You've got Will Fuller, who I know you clamored for earlier in the offseason out there. Do you think the 49ers should add a receiver?
So let's look at the receiver room, right? Um, so we have like Brandon Ayuk making the roster. Juwan Jennings should make the roster. Debo Samuel obviously will make the roster because he's not being traded. You have Ray McLeod, who was signed to be that main guy, and then Danny Gray, right? So that's already six receivers. Yeah, six receivers already, right? So the guy being having to be cut would most likely be Jawan Jennings, but he showed enough flash to where you don't cut him because he's a younger dude. Especially last year, he came in clutch on key situations. So bringing in a guy, he better be a guy who for sure is going to be worth cutting Jawan Jennings, right? Or worth cutting because Ray McLeod does have dead cap. So that's something that you wouldn't be able to do. Um,
Right. So that's why I do think there are five locks, and it's only, I think the the one thing that makes this unrealistic is that this receiver, who's the sixth guy, likely has to play special teams, given how many of the other players on the unit don't. That's something these players don't necessarily have in their pedigree over the last couple of seasons. But you're right.
Well, we do have guys that play special teams though, because we have Ray plays special teams. I'm sure Danny Gray will get the opportunity to return punts and kicks. Debo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk both could return kicks and punts. And then Jawan Jennings plays special teams. He actually played on the punt unit and then the kickoff unit. I believe. I think he was also on the return unit. So we do
Really?
have guys that play special. Yeah.
Interesting.
He plays special teams because I remember I was watching him and I was like, wow, he actually got down the field pretty damn fast. So yeah, he does play special teams. So it's one of those situations where how much more will they rely on him to play special teams? You know what I mean? So stuff like that, because he's becoming a number 3 receiver. So do you rely on him to be your special team ace? And some dudes like Raheem Mostert at one point, he still played special teams even when he was running back 1, because that's something they really like hold themselves accountable to. So I think the 49ers, if they bring in a guy, it better be a guy who makes it worth cutting. Out of all those guys, I think Ray McLeod's cap hit isn't too hard of a cap hit. So 2 million on a cap hit. So you could cut him. I think this year you would have a 2 million cap hit on him, casualty. So you could, but I don't think they want to do that. They brought him in because he actually is a good a guy in open space and he's a good returner. So I think that's something they want to actually have, and they brought him in for. So bringing a guy, I like the Julio Jones situation to compete. I like the like you right there. Ray McLeod been making plays in OTAs. We're very excited for him in the slot, but
Yeah.
even in the return game, right?
Right. Yeah,
So we
exactly.
have
Like Baller said real quick, McLeod has been a positive influence apparently in OTAs. Back in the practice on Wednesday, he had 4 catches on six what do you call them? 6 attempts, the highest for both, a team high for both. So McLeod has been getting action as that check down option on certain plays, according to Grant Cohn.
and it, like so when I mean like guys that will make it worth cutting one of these guys. So like I get like the Julio Jones aspect, but at the end of his career, like is it worth cutting a guy who came into his own for 1 year, right? So like when I mean like being worth it, we have guys like DJ Chark still out there who's proven to be pretty damn good, and he's still only 25, seems to be 26 by the time mid season. So stuff like more guys like that that I would rather take the risk on and bringing in, and then if you cut someone, you could have that young ability because he is a deep threat. He has that ability. That's someone I would want to bring in. Maybe even like a Odell Beckham, maybe because he's not young anymore, but I think Odell Beckham could still give you a few years. Um, so if you sign him, you can sign him to a cheap 1 year deal because he's 29, so he'd be 20. Think he turns 30 as soon as the season starts. So you'd be years depending on how that knee heals. But I would more so go like a younger guy, like a DJ Chark kind of thing, if you're gonna have to cut a Jawan Jennings or a Ray McLeod in that situation.
Yeah, and I'll throw you one last name before we end this exercise, and it's a defensive guy. I think the points you made there were good. Look, Javon Kinlaw coming back from injury. He's been rehabbing, expected to be back for training camp. Another defensive tackle, Kalia Davis, is also recovering from a torn ACL. He isn't going to be there right now. So right now, like there are a couple of names that are intriguing in the defensive tackle market, and there was one that was recently cut from the Chicago Bears, Eddie Goldman, a 28-year-old guy who is in free agency right now. And when I see a guy like Eddie Goldman, he probably is looking for one more big payday before his career is over. And what better place to be a reclamation project in a way than San Francisco, that has produced amazing seasons out of guys like Kerry Hyder and Arden Key en route to them getting bags. What do you think about that option?
It's very intriguing because I believe he is a turning 20. I think he's like it is 27, 28, like in that range, right? Because I remember he's from Florida State. He's represented by a guy who it also represents Debo Samuel, Tory Dandy. So that's something that, like, hey, bring your own guys in, man. Like, hey, let's bring Debo back. Let's bring Eddie Goldman in. But that's definitely something they should think about doing, is bringing in another defensive tackle who could stuff Javon Kinlaw coming off injury. But with how deep this 49ers roster is at the defensive line position, so like you said, they have 17 dudes in camp that are purely defensive linemen, right? So guys that could fill that role. So they brought back a guy like Maurice Hurst, Kevin Givens, brought in Hassan Ridgeway, who should be that guy to stuff the run. So bringing in another defensive tackle, it would be nice, but that means if they're bringing in another defensive tackle, one of these guys has to be injured. So for us to bring in one of those guys, they're like, if we sign Eddie Goldman right now, I would be very concerned on injury wise, because that would mean Maurice Hurst, Kevin Givens, Ridgeway, or Javon Kinlaw had to get injured, because those guys at this point, in my opinion, are better suited for the 49ers system defensively than a guy like Eddie Goldman. So I would be concerned if they brought him in, but I would not mind it to compete for a roster spot with a guy like Kevin Givens or a guy like Maurice Hurst, because it's one of those ones where more defensive line is better.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, Eddie Goldman at the moment, he probably, if they sign him, it's a 1 year deal with an incentivized kind of deal, probably. And I'm very interested in a way to see how he'd function as a situational guy, right? As an early down guy or something like that. His snap count has been decreasing over there in Chicago, but he's also been playing around guys like Hakeem Hicks and other key players over there on that defensive line for the past couple of years. So it's understandable. But if he only plays maybe 40, 35, 40% snaps, I think that could be a like something that like 49ers definitely and Chris Costera could turn around. But you're right. It does depend, because it seems like the 49ers like their guys, right? Like they're pretty high on Kinlaw, obviously. He's coming back from injury. Another guy who's coming back from injury who they had high hopes on and then re-signed despite playing very minimal games last year. You mentioned him, Maurice Hurst. I think that he was a pretty good signing last year, and I'd like to see what he has in the tank going into this year. He's only 27 as well, a little younger than Eddie Goldman. So there are a good amount of guys. And then obviously we have our guy in Kevin Givens. And I don't think we can put really any of those three, or maybe Hurst, but I don't think that you can put some of these guys in the practice squad. I think that they get claimed before that. So it would be a tough decision, and it likely indicates that the 49ers aren't thrilled about one of their current guys that could fight for that 53-man spot if they bring in Eddie Goldman.
And I wouldn't be mad or anything if they did bring in a guy like that, because competition is what you need in camp. Competition is what it eliminates the bad from players, right? Because you can't be, when you're competing for roster spots, you can't take a playoff. So you see what the best your players could possibly be, and it makes everyone better. Now, what I'm concerned about with the defensive line isn't necessarily the injuries, but it's a lot of these guys being the same style of guys, right? So like we have some of these guys, they all fit the same mold. But the good thing is that's the mold they're looking for these positions. So I'm one of those guys where I like to have like depth throughout the entire thing, but guys that could do different things. So for example, the reason why like Arik Armstead is one of the best defensive linemen on the 49ers is his versatility. Now, Ridgeway, he's not. I don't think he could play outside like Arik Armstead. Kevin Givens, he can, but it's not going to be that good. Maurice Hurst, I think he's solely inside. So these guys like are solely inside. So that's why I think bringing in another defensive tackle would be concerning, because it means they're not either progressing in their rehab stages or they don't like how they are. And then I don't know if you saw that video clip. Are you still there, Rohan?
Yeah, we're here.
I didn't freeze. Okay, perfect. Thought I froze. So what did you guys think of the video Grant posted about Trey Lance's OTAs? I saw the video. Not much. So like, so the thing is, I'm not gonna get. I like seeing videos like that because you see the because it's just him throwing to a coach. It's him warming up. It's not nothing
Right.
major. I think it just shows the throwing mechanics has changed and his throwing mechanics better.
No, I agree. I don't really like to take too much out of those videos because I don't view them as that important. However, I mean, you get to see the mechanically, like the mechanical changes that we've been seeing over the last couple of weeks from Trey Lance, from last season to this season. I honestly thought his mechanics changed even a bit in the Week 16 game, but now that his fingers fully healed, you get to see how Trey Lance truly throws now and how he's changed that motion with the, like, I remember that there was like that degree chart. I forget exactly the name of it, but it really broke down how Trey Lance's motion through changed from last year to this year. And it's interesting, and it was like a concern of certain people. So to see that Trey Lance has made improvements on that after that one offseason, and to see the accuracy changes in the early portions of OTAs, I think that's promising, at least a promising start.
But like, and let me, and I should rephrase that because like, it sounds like we're like, oh, telling people like, don't look into that video. Don't, it's nothing. It's not important, right? Because like we're both like, oh, we're trying to be objective about it, right? We're not trying to like dig too deep into it or actually, but if from the fan perspective, for me not actually like looking at stuff certain ways, because when I watch football and I look at stuff certain ways, like I have to like have context with it. But from a fan perspective, I'm like I love seeing that because I love seeing um, stuff that was concerning to fans was his little wobble he had in the ball, right? That they're like, oh, he always has a wobble, no wobble, tight spiral, look much better. This it's a slower video, so much. But from a fan perspective, I'm looking at that video and I'm like, hell to the yeah, this quarterback is the real deal. But I'm like I said, like, I can't look too far into it because it's not much. I want to see a pass rush coming at him. I want to see him be able to navigate the pocket, slide in, be able to slide right, slide left, hitch a time or hitch twice or whatever the case may be. That's
Yeah.
what I look for in the quarterback. I'm not really trying to break down a video, but like I said, the fan in me is looking at that video like I love it, I love it, I love it. But me actually looking at this from a perspective of giving content and stuff like that, I have to say not too much looking into it. So just want to clarify that. Not trying to say for you guys to go out there and when you see a video of OTAs or practice, don't look at it. Don't look at it. Don't get too hyped about it because we're fans. You have to get hyped. You want to get hyped, and that's the end of the day when I'm watching stuff and I'm not like on a recording or I'm not tweeting about it or talking about it, I'm watching. I'm like, damn, like this, and I'm sending it to my family. Like, I can't wait for this. I can't like look at this. So like, I get why you guys are excited about it.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, I can definitely understand it. And it's nice, especially because you don't see too much in this period. Nice to get those couple little videos out. But yeah, I mean, this wraps up today's episode. We covered a ton of stuff. We covered Alex Mack, covered the next moves for the 49ers. Thank you guys all in the chat so much for tuning in. Swan Song, Bryant, 49ers Throwback, and Eric, and all the guys who really came in. Thank you guys all for tuning in. Me and Marco will be back soon. Talked about Alex Mack, talked about the remainder of the team, the status of the franchise right now, and potential additions following the extra roster spots.